concepts and terminologies used. We'll have some demonstrations being done, and then we'll have a Q&A session where, as Victor has said, at the end of the session, we can have a Q&A where we can answer some of your queries. Now, remember that this is a first of a series. So this is a session that will actually be built up on based on your feedback. So also look out for the link that Victor will share after the presentation in the chat, and then we can be able to know how to build up from here and what to bring you next. All right, so what is ArcGIS Workflow Manager, and how can it help us in our day-to-day? So you want to think of Workflow Manager as a scalable system that helps you with your work management, and it actually helps you to combine all the GIS and non-GIS processes and make them as efficient as possible. So when you think ArcGIS Workflow Manager, then you think automation mainly. You think about how you can track some of the jobs that are being done. And you think about what are some of the best practices, how can your teams collaborate, and how can you have centralized system. So it's always very critical for your organization to agree that we are conducting tasks in a certain manner and would like to make them more efficient, especially in a certain step. And then after you've done that identification, it's easier for us to guide you, or even to guide yourself based on some of the resources that we'll share, so that you design some of the workflows, you actually manage some of the jobs, and people can now just work. And as they're working, it can be seen live, right? So what are some of the challenges with work that is repeated? Maybe someone can type it in the comments, and we'll go through at a later stage. But when you have work that involves every other day going to the office, for example, and digitizing a section and then submitting, this maybe you follow a 4-stage pattern, and then the work is submitted, and then it is reviewed, and then multiple parties actually work to complete it. This may prove to be challenging in some scenarios. And for any establishment or any organization to complete work once, but then try to scale it up to be performed by many people in the organization many more times, and the results required in a short term, how will you ensure that you're maintaining the same quality, the same standards and the same productivity? And so it becomes very hard without any assistance in that coordination. Management just becomes a nightmare, and all the challenges that were prior, that were smaller, become more magnified, right? And these processes are really slowed down. Also, we are human, and mistakes can really happen, and the quality now significantly drops down, right? And that's where ArcGIS Workflow comes in, where it can actually help you to streamline and automate some of these production processes, and act now as the orchestration factor, right, to keep everything just running smoothly. Having said some of the challenges that come with repeatable work, then can we actually look at how each of these challenges can be addressed, right? So you actually improve data quality by centralizing and managing all the work and spatial information. And remember that now really helps you when you're handling scalability. You also increase a lot of trust and reduce risks, because when the organization actually designs and uses a process, everyone follows. This is because now it is very predictable and it can be easily monitored. It's very easy to now see and act on every problem as they arise, right? And you can also increase the user satisfaction, because by automating a lot of these tedious manual repetitive tasks that we've talked about, then all your users can easily perform, the tasks that they want to, or rather that they are assigned, and they can stop performing the tedious manual tasks and just focus on the work that is very key to their designations. So, for example, your work is a librarian, and as a librarian, maybe in your institution, you're in charge of some cartography work, and all you need to do is perhaps clip some areas and publish. So you just focus on that. You don't really need to do so much more. And we also talk about increasing productivity, whereby when now you're resolving issues and bottlenecks using ArcGIS Workflow Manager, this can easily help your workforce coordination because you're automating the result, right? And when you automate the result, then you actually increase a lot of productivity. So you look at some of the manual steps that you could have taken, and when that is automated, so that now it's a result-oriented kind of approach, then you really increase the productivity, okay? And also improving a lot of knowledge transfer. You do know that if we are 10 in an organization or we are 10 in a department, and each one of us is really focused on the individual tasks and steps, it's very hard then to improve knowledge transfer. But if we automate the system whereby there's a section where a manager can assign jobs, there's another section where maybe a GIS coordinator can start off some of the jobs, and then there's a section where a GIS personnel in the field can just come and conduct the job. Then that really helps you to also have that knowledge transfer. The managers can understand what the people on the ground are doing. The coordinators can have an easier way of even adding some description that may have been missed out by the manager. And the person doing the work can always now have a better view of the tool. As much as they're using it, they can always give back more information, right? And what makes ArcGIS softwares different, right? Always the geographic approach. We really care about the work's location, and after we get that location, then we really use it effectively. One, in analysis, and two, we use it in reporting. So think of dashboard, think of ArcGIS dashboard where you can visualize a lot of components, but relate them to their location. So that is something that always keep in mind when you're using ArcGIS software. The geographic approach comes in play. Automatically think about, fine, you're combining a GIS and non-GIS work, but how best can you utilize the locational aspect? Because that is definitely one of the strengths of the softwares that we provide. Right, so of course, this ArcGIS workflows has to keep in consideration that we have mobile workers, we have people who are mainly focused on the web, we have GIS personnel who just utilize the desktop software, and we have people who now have a major focus on the ArcGIS Enterprise, that is the ArcGIS on-premise. And ArcGIS Workflows considers all these components. And with time, we are going to have a scenario where we've talked of, this is our first session, where we are just more or less introducing this to you. So we'll be biased to the web and the desktop, but we will also want you to tell us more on your interest, because you can have a next session where we actually link this to the field workflows and demonstrate to you how this can work in mobile and in some of the apps. And In another session, we can also show you how this can work in an ArcGIS enterprise, where now it's full scale and all the components are actually on the go. And we can also show you some of the scripting elements where you can now use Python in ArcGIS notebooks to automate all the processes. So we will really be building up on this, and we'll be really happy if you can pick up some of these components and use them in your day-to-day. Well, what are some of the common patterns that you can use? I understand that we have people from various backgrounds, and Victor asked us in the beginning, where are you from, and maybe what are you doing, as we were exchanging pleasantries. So it's also just important, with that understanding in mind, to think of an area in the things you do. So think of your day-to-day, think of your job, think of your work, think of the things that you interact with more often. Do you see any of what you do on the screen right now? If you don't, then that's also fine. You can be a little bit more creative and relate what we've shared with you and see what you're doing in your day-to-day. Because when you talk about environment reviews, you're talking about things like EIS, right? Environment impact assessments. You can actually request for more information from the ground or support, and you can conduct inspections. In fact, our demo today will be leaning more towards someone who wants to do inspections. You can do services management, virtually or remotely. You can do some asset alarm management. We may not be able to demo this today in this session, but we'll be very keen to demo in the next session how you can actually have an alarm management element, right? You can have network management, land management, all these kinds of inventory management and so on. And this will really help you in your daily assignments, I do believe, right? So when you're talking about data submission, imagine a simple workflow. As we were describing in the previous slides, we talked about you're one individual, you're analyzing this map, maybe you're sharing it with someone else who is visualizing it on a dashboard, right? So you get this map that perhaps this is Kenya counties. You've created this map for Kenya counties. You have Kenya roads. You've created this map for Kenya roads, and you're now having different classes of those data sets, all right? And then you're visualizing them in a dashboard, for example, and you have someone doing it. So imagine doing that, but as a team. Imagine a scenario where you're mapping out the whole Kenya. You're mapping out data sets that run across a whole country, for example, or Uganda, or Tanzania, or Ethiopia, which is even larger. So how do those workflows look like, right? So you're submitting these workflows, but this is a complex workflow in the sense of how these are actually defined and submitted, all right? So when you want to understand the automation workflows, then you can actually see that for specifically automated data processing, there may be a few stages that you follow. But now as you automate, you want all the stages to be equally achieved at a shorter period. So we have service-driven deployments. So in case you have any queries on the licensing models, we have a very able team. You can always ask in the chat. But depending with what your organization has, be it ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, we have organizational capability. We have the web application where you can administer, manage, and people can conduct work. And you can have a scenario where you're working in ArcGIS Pro. So that is in the desktop scenario. And we also talked about Python or JavaScript or REST APIs, which can be consumed as well, and we will build up and hopefully we get there. But remember, if you have the licenses for ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, then you can easily deploy the ArcGIS Workflow Manager. All right, so we'll look at some of the building workflows, and here we'll look at some of the key components and terminology. As we look at our demo, it's very important for you to understand some of these components, because we have the design, which is the most important part of the workflow job, whereby you want to actually have everything well designed, right? And then you have your steps and paths. So the steps are now some of the components that will be achieved, and we will be seeing this live. We'll actually have an example that will demonstrate, and each step has a function. Each step has a function. We have various steps that we actually utilize. We have the manual step. We have the comment. You can add a comment. You can add a manual step. You can add a question. Right? You can add you can actually edit the job properties as well, and so on and so forth. So we'll actually have a look at some of those steps. They are very, very straightforward. And this is what you actually see the moment you open your web user interface. And you've actually heard me talk about adding a comment, adding a manual step, adding a question, start or end. Start or end really defines when you want to end the process. And for you to be able to activate the workflow, you always have to have a start and an end, or rather a start or an end, whereby the workflow is not looping. Okay, the workflow is not looping. It's actually very straightforward on the steps being followed, right? So this is the step library, and you have the templates that perform different actions. Remember, all these are available out of the box, and you can customize the values and styles as you deem fit, the properties, the options, about, and so on. So we're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to actually try and do the demo as quickly as possible. So just stay keen as we run through some of those processes. All right. So some of the parts that we are talking about here, all right, you can actually see them you can see them here, whereby you're connecting steps in the workflow. Are the edits complete? No, then go back and open the map and edit tasks. Are they complete? Yes, then, continue to the next step. So they are configured with logic to move the workflow forward, as well as the job assignments and status. And when you're returning the code, you evaluate the return code from the step that just completed, all right? And we have expressions where you can evaluate an arcade expression. And we want to actually get to a stage where in the consequent webinars, we can be able to actually look at some of the arcade expressions and so on, right? So when you talk of the data sources, then the feature service data sources can be configured on each diagram. Okay, you could have various feature services that will be utilized. And when you're using ArcGIS Enterprise, or those of us in the webinar who have ArcGIS Enterprise, then you're familiar with versioning of data. And if versioning will be used in the workflow, then the feature services need to be published with the version management capability. So those are some of the things that you have to be keen on. But remember, the resources are always very much available. And all the jobs are actually created from the job template. And we will see one of the job templates and how that looks like. And then we'll actually be able to look at the template properties, some of the default ones, the extended properties, sharing, whether you want to share, as you always say, privately, in the organization, in a group, or also with everyone, right? And of course, we have some automated actions and some actions that are that have to be manual. And we, in our example, or rather in our demonstration that we will do today, let's just run through some components and be able to see how that is. As earlier indicated, in case you have a query, feel free to type it in the chat and we'll be able to respond to you as soon as we are done with the demonstration. All right, so I'll just share my web page. So this is ArcGIS Online, and this is ArcGIS Online, and I want to open the workflow manager. So I'll simply come here under the applications and then click on workflow manager. So I hope you can see that on your screens. Okay, so now these are just some of the tests that we're doing. You come here and create a workflow item, and you can give it a name, maybe talk of webinar workflow manager, and then maybe give it a scenario, right? So you can talk of road assessment. Okay, so we're thinking of a scenario where you want to have someone in the office assign some jobs, and then as those jobs are assigned, someone else actually goes to the field and assesses those roads that have been assigned to them. And you can do this on the web, and you can do this on the ArcGIS Pro. So remember, in the next session, we may actually connect this to a mobile application. In this session, we're looking at it from a general point of view, whereby you've assigned someone the task, someone has actually done the inspection, they attach some evidence of the work done, and then from that point on, you can also come back and visualize it in you can come back and visualize it in a web map, and you see what it's doing right now. As it's creating a workflow item, it's also creating several maps, or rather layers. It's creating several feature layers and some maps that you'll be able to utilize to even create dashboards. You can view them independently and so on, right? So it's always important to understand the workflow. And once you've created your workflow manager, go and understand the workflow items, the maps that you have, and know which map you can use for what, right? So this is as you open your workflow manager. This is the interface that you're going to interact with, or rather, this is the interface that you will meet. And on this user interface, you realize there's something already existing. This is where you manage your work. This is where you design your work, and you can actually see there is introduction to the workflow manager. So for each item that you create, you actually get this design page where you can now see an example of how this is done. You can decide to edit it, to just see and query more, right? If I come here and say edit this, I can click on each of them and I can see some of the descriptions, some of the options set there, and so on. And if you do that and activate, it will actually be able to show up under some of the work here. And under work, you can create it as a job. We wanted, however, to do ours manually, and we wanted to do it ourselves. So this is just for you. As you try this out on your own, please kindly come here and test it out extensively, and you'll be able to create something. Okay, so we can come here and duplicate this so that we save on time. So let me just go back, and then we can duplicate this and then delete everything, right? So you can duplicate this, get a copy of that, and then we can edit the copy. So first, if you come here and you select all and just delete that, you get a clean slate. So let's give our design a new name. Let's talk of maybe webinar demonstration or webinar demo, road assessment. Okay, and this diagram will provide a walkthrough through walkthrough of road assessment steps. Right, so that's important because if someone else is interacting with your design, it's always important for them to know how you came about or your thought process. It's always important to know your thought process. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a manual step, and the manual step will enable us to start off the process. Remember, an automated function will run by itself, but to start off, you require to start with a manual step, right? In our case, we can actually say the name of this step is perhaps assign inspector for a segment, right? So for the segment, and then for the user prompt, this is what the user will see. And here you can just say assign. We can actually to save time, we can copy some of that, and then so you can assign the inspector to assess the condition, to just assess road condition. Okay, and having done that, under properties, you can come to the options and have a look at what is required. So this one has to be manual. Remember, when you're talking about automated steps, we can have some steps that run automatically, but for some, you want someone to start them before they start. So for example, this one, it has to be manual because someone will click and you'll see that real time. Yeah, someone will have to click it for it to take off. Okay, so the inspector assignment generally just requires the human decision making. That is why we're saying you have to add it as a manual step. The second thing, so these are under options, under style, you may change the color as you wish, all right? And then under about, you can actually come and, have some description that suits this work, right? So you can actually just come here and say, assign based on availability. So this is the person, this is like the manager we were talking about. Let's just save that. We will get to activating later. We can add the next step. Maybe we add a commenter. So someone, you've done the assign inspector for segment, and then we can say that the next step is for this person to provide us some feedback, right? So perhaps just under the properties, I have to come back to here. I change from add name to the step name can just be road condition, road condition feedback. And for this here, we can actually come here and tell this person to provide some feedback on the road condition. Okay, so here you can add that as a comment, and then under options, you probably also want this to be manual so that once they are ready, they now click on the feedback and provide it, right? So, and remember also something important. There's something important here where you have the step help. Here, there are some scenarios where you may actually want this person to be able to understand the function more. So you can come here under step help and just give them much more information. So we may not do this for each and every of them, but just for context, we can talk of include details on the road quality. Okay, and then we talk of maybe visible damage and hazards. All right, so we can, or you can give that as a, URL. Okay, so those are just some of the most critical steps. So these are steps, and we've talked of path. So you simply come and drag that, and that way you have your path declared. Remember, the path also has some properties. You can decide whether you want to, maintain the assignment, maintain status, and so on. What happens after, success, and so on. So those are just some of the elements that you want to make sure you add. You can also add a question, okay? So in our case, a question will be something along the lines of condition verification or confirmation, So once the inspection data is uploaded, one of the team members might just confirm that the data meets the quality standards, all right? So in this step, you can actually just have a yes or no question here. So maybe here you can talk of condition verification. Okay, and do you realize that for each of them, it already comes with something. So it gives you an idea of, you're just replacing some existing texts that give you a good idea of what's happening. So here you can maybe talk of confirm quality standards, yeah? Confirm maybe data quality standards, all right? So depending with the assignment that you're doing, so this can just be a yes or no question. So you have a scenario where here you can put when someone should select yes and when they should select no. Maybe select yes if data meets the standards, no if it puts back to further data, and so on. So you can actually term and configure those steps and what will the response look like. So here I come and pull that as well. Now, I may want to also update, so the GIS manager can update some of the job, they can update some of the job properties. Is this job urgent, and so on, okay? So if I come here and remember, I'm just connecting, I'm just connecting most of it. So I'll delete this part because I must have picked it wrongly. You click on the apex and then you just pull. All right. So the job properties can come here, and under the table we may want to maybe update the job name and perhaps also update the priority. All right. So you can maybe change from the current priority to a bit higher, depending with the assessment that has been done. So for this update job properties, you can just leave it as update job properties. And here you can actually just tell someone to adjust the priority. So change the name. Sorry about that. So change the name and status, and that's it. So we'll not do much for this. Under options, again, you want to maybe have this as automated, and also the condition verification can be automatic. So automatic, as we said, just means someone will not need to click for it to begin. So as we run this, you'll be able to see what you're talking about. Now remember, if we try to, okay, so let's just save this and try to activate. If we tried to activate this without having a start or end, that will mean this thing will just be looping. And so it will give us an error. Yeah? So if we try to activate it, well, so do you want to actually create a job? So before we even do that, let's actually just create the job template, or we can go and create the job template later. So we can just say no for this because we are more keen on just saving. So we are more keen on saving what we have right now. So you don't want to have a loop, and therefore you want to add a start or end task, right? So whereby you can actually come and complete this task here. So this can be the end of our task. Let's just make sure we do connect that. And here you want to perhaps start the activity. So this is a scenario where we have the manager, and then we have the GIS manager doing some things, and then now you can start the repair task, right? So just maybe talk of start or end the repair task. Okay. So you can have a user prompt to just start or mark as complete. All right. So just tell this person to start the work or mark as complete. Okay. So let's save that and then test it out. So remember, we've not done much. We've not created some of the descriptions of how our job will look like. But if we activate it anyway and come here under work, this is where you'll see the importance of the job descriptions and so on. So if you come here, you find that we don't have the job listed here. So let's come here to design and have a look at what this looks like. And then we come to job templates here. And we can add a job template and give it some properties, all right? And then you can choose your workflow diagram here and assign it, all right? So you can come here and give it a template name, maybe webinar template. Give it a summary. This is a road assessment component. And then leave the status active and then select our webinar demo. All right, so select that as our workflow diagram. And then you can decide, you can always decide when you want to set the job start date and end date, priority of the initial priority of the job, and so on. So when you come here and you save that, it's now listed here as some of the jobs that you can assign. So if you come here under work and you want to create a job, now you can see our webinar template now appears. And if you click on webinar template, for example, you get that you've assigned the first job there. You can click on it again to assign another job. And so this one's, the way we named our jobs is we said assign it the name job and give it a second value as the index. So remember, in our workflow, there's a point where we said we can be able to update. There's a place where we said we can be able to update the job properties, okay? So if you come here to all jobs, then you'll actually see the first job there. You'll see the second job, okay? So let's attempt the first one. Remember, the first step was to assign the inspector for the segment. So if you come and start this step here, you can now see that you'll assign the inspector for that. So you just proceed. You can now see the next one is reading the road condition feedback. And so you can come and perhaps you're the manager, you're the GIS manager on the ground. You can actually come and talk of severe damage. And therefore someone needs to go and assess it. Then we don't want our job to, so you can actually confirm the data standards, and that continues. And now we come to the job properties that we set, whereby we can now update this name. We can now talk of maybe CIR road for someone to assess it. And because it's severe, we can have the priority as high. And as we proceed, so this will change. So once we refresh this, you'll actually see that this will have actually changed. So we don't want to start the work or mark as complete. We will go and edit. We'll go and edit, or we can if we say proceed just for demonstration on what happens, then this will actually disappear in the sense that this work has been completed. But remember, we wanted another step where now the GIS person can actually be able to utilize a map to do some kind of analysis. So now let's go back to our design. So you've actually seen how that works. So we're thinking this can be up to the level of the GIS manager. So this is maybe the general manager in the office, and then he sends a field officer to the field, and the field officer conducts those steps up to this place. And then you can be able to add, maybe let's add two more things. You can add an attachment, right? So you can add an attachment here. And just link that as well. And then finally, we can define the location of perhaps the place where that road requires to be fixed. So these are our two last steps. So you can talk of perhaps attach inspection reports. And we can also maybe just use a prompt. We can leave it as please add attachments. That's totally okay. You can have the person add a link or access a PDF or JPEG and so on, or just files from their own PCs. For this, we'll leave it as the section. We'll leave it as something that they can do from their computer. You can make this a manual so that someone is able to pick it, and then we can make it optional, all right? So under define location, you may want to tell someone to mark the exact area of interest, right? So you just say of AOI, and then they'll be given an option to either select or draw. Now remember, this is where you come and add your web map. Okay, if you come here now to some of the maps that you have created, we have a web map here for the Kenya roads and Kenya counties and roads. I can simply come here, copy this ID and add it. And you'll see the reference name comes automatically. I save that. And once that is done, this is the web map that will be used for my area of interest. Okay, so once that is done, I can save and then activate. Let's go and now see what has changed under work. So let me create, we're now thinking job 3. Okay, so I'll just come here and start it manually. So for this one, we can just rush through. I'll proceed. And remember, as it's running, it tells you what it is exactly you're doing, right? So gives you the step and gives you some of the elements that now you need to input. So you can have some steps that don't need, so you can just say medium. This is maybe, can talk of medium, then proceed. And remember, it's always very important to guide the people on the ground or the people utilizing some of the workflows. And here maybe you can talk of GIS. And next time we'll look at some of the ways which you can use ArcGIS, for example, to even make it more intuitive. Okay, so here I can change this to maybe Bungoma assessment. Okay, priority I can change to medium. And then proceed. Okay, and then under, so I can decide to start the work. So as I start the work, you'll figure that now it goes to the next step where I can attach the inspection reports. And if I start this step, for example, I can be able to browse in my PC, select something, and once I attach it, it comes. So this can be an assessment report. Maybe you're doing environmental impact assessment. This is your version of impact assessment, and then I can proceed to the map. Just before we proceed, however, I would like us to load. I hope that our map will, so here I'll actually come and you can see the map. You can see the map now appears here, okay? And I can look for, we talked of Bungoma, right? So we can look for Bungoma and perhaps create, we can create an area. So you can just draw it as a polygon and maybe say on this part of the road, this is where I want the repairs to be focused on. Then if I come here and say proceed, then this will be finalized, right? So it has completed and I can dismiss it. Let's just come here and look at all the jobs. You now see the only job that is remaining is this job 2. If I come here, however, to manage, I'll now be able to see a clear indication of some of the jobs that have not been done. They'll be listed here, total, new, and so on. But remember, we said for each of these components, they are being created on my content. So here, I now have the layers that we can have a look at. So you see, this is the workflow job location view. This is the hosted view. This is the workflow layer. You can actually come and have a look at at these layers. Let's refresh this meanwhile. And if you come here and you open this, you'll be able to see some of the components that you've just updated on your map. So if you zoom in to the area, you'll perhaps be able to see some of the areas that, or some of the components that you've just updated. So let's see if there's any other, map that has been added. Let's just come here and see if there's any other. So you can actually now see we have the job location view also added here. These are the layers that are added automatically as the components are being done, all right? And in the interest of time, we're just trying to now rush through. That's why I'm opening many of them at a go. So let's just close those and open the ones that we want to deal with from our most immediate workflow. So as this open, you're able to see, like here, you're able to see the locations of the jobs that you've assigned. Here, let's open this and see what appears there. Okay. So remember we talked about the element of these components automatically are synced to your ArcGIS system. So this is the area we've added for Bungoma. So as you click on it, you can actually see the job name is Bungoma Assessment. You can be able to see the priority rank and so on and so forth, all right? And you can see the job status. So these are some of the components that now you can use to create dashboards. And maybe in our next sessions, we'll look at how we can be able to do that. So this is the job type chart that you can actually open and see the job charts. But I hope that really sheds some light on the overview. Remember, we are really trying to put as much information, to squeeze as much information into so little time. So it may be almost impossible to cover everything. But I hope that sheds some light on how the user interface looks like. So let me share my ArcGIS Pro screen for maybe 2 minutes or so. I hope you can see my ArcGIS Pro screen. Here, if you come to under map, this was the map I published that has the major roads and counties. If you come here and analyze some of these components, map insert analysis, you get functionalities that revolve around them. Now, under view, we have the workflow manager here. If I come and click on the workflow pane, this is what opens. And you can now see the ones that are here, the ones workflow, test workflow. If I refresh this, we expect to see the webinar road assessment that we've just created. So assuming that you're working on ArcGIS Pro, you can simply come here, click on this, and connect to it. When you connect to it, you can now be able to even create some of the jobs here, okay? So some of the jobs that exist, you can be able to come and just create them here automatically, okay? So this is the job 2 that we saw there. This is the only job that existed on our web. If I come here and now click on run, then you can be able to see that it starts and the process is the same as it was on the ArcGIS online. All right, so I hope that really sheds more light on the usability, or rather on the use case of ArcGIS workflow Manager, we will really try and give you more. We'll really try and give you more sessions where we have a bigger focus on more components. So I hope you can now see my screen. We are back to the slides, and these are some of the key features that are there in the workflow management. Talking about the workflow diagram, the location, the work assessment, some of the prioritization, controlled access, notifications, and so on. So we'll be looking at more of this, scheduling work, webhooks, and remember, for ArcGIS Enterprise, you have the SMTP, so you can set some emails to be shared. But for ArcGIS Online, you want to maybe use webhooks. And we'll be looking at more and more information as time goes. All right, so there's some resources here. So you can scan this QR code and get a whole blog page where we have resources for Workflow Manager, so that you can feed your curiosity before our next session. Right? So please do give us your feedback, no matter. Please do give us your feedback, but also get resources here that you can try some things on your own. And by the time we get to the next webinar, where we'll be focusing on connecting these to field applications, then it can be really easy for you.